Hello, hello. How are we all this evening? All this afternoon, all this morning? How's the mic audio now? Should hopefully be better. I've got a bit of a different setup now. I've got it sort of hanging down in front of me, clipped to the excuse me, clipped to the camera. So hopefully it makes it a bit better as I've got my head down working. As you can see, we are really close to being finished on the key block. We'll be finishing up the this section in here this evening, and then be making I couldn't get the block finished in time to do colour blocks, to do separations and stuff, but is what it is, I suppose. I hope you're all well. Let's get working. If anyone has any questions, as usual, just type up in chat and I'll answer as we go along. I'm also trying a slightly different. Oh, good. Hi, Ben. Trying a slightly different camera position. The way I had it before is my head's quite far away from the block, so it makes it quite tough to see properly what I'm doing. I wear glasses. I've got terrible eyesight. So here with these sections, because there's a lot of lines sort of flowing in the same direction, to sort of make it easier for myself, a little bit faster and sort of less disorientating for you guys, I just go along and carve all one side of the line, and then I'll flip the block round and do the same thing the other way. Why do I use stick-on Kento? One, it's sort of a really bad habit that I got into quite early on when I was sort of terrified of carving real Kento and making a mistake, and I sort of ended up sticking with it. And two, because I'm still rather inexperienced, I can sometimes have, for anyone not familiar, these here, this sticker and this sticker, are stick-on Kentos. Usually you'll see them on beginners, or maybe sometimes you might see them on some blocks that Dave and that use if there is almost no wood to stick to actually make a registration mark on, or if there's a registration mark in a really odd place they might stick it. But yeah, sort of due to my inexperience and my previous bad habits, I use them, and it's just, I don't know why. I probably should be more professional and use them, but they're cheap and it's quick, so it's only me ever printing my blocks. It's never going to be printed, well, not for a long time is it ever going to be printed by another printer, so I just use them myself. Probably a bit zoomed in there. But thank you for people sending in comments through Patreon and also commenting on YouTube from the last stream. Hopefully some of those issues are now solved. Hopefully audio is better, and I hope this angle that I'm using now on the camera's a bit better. It's a lot easier for me to work with. I know you're sort of looking down across the block, but I thought it might work quite well because you get to see the sort of the angle that my knife's coming in from. But yeah, so I've been thinking about using Discord over Facebook and stuff, and while I think Facebook's probably the easier option, and I think that's what I will go with in terms of creating a group. Discord does have a lot of other features that could be quite beneficial in terms of us being able to share content, share images and stuff with each other, and breaking things into sections. I just feel Facebook's probably a bit easier managed and a bit more accessible to everyone. Almost everyone does have a Facebook profile, and it's a pretty familiar system for people to learn if they don't. So I think I'll probably set that up this weekend and stuff, and I'll start off by inviting the Patreons and stuff. I'll post a link onto Patreon, and then I'll post a click through onto my Instagram profile, and we can get it up and running, start a little community, hopefully. And I feel like it'd be quite a good format for me to, quite a good platform for me to sort of post short how-to videos or update videos and things like that maybe are a little bit too short or informal for YouTube. Maybe they can be posted to that group. I don't know, how do you guys feel about excuse me, feel about that? Problem is with carving the lines like this, usually I'll turn the block because I'm not a traditionally trained carver, so I turn the block quite a lot. So when I carve like this, it's quite easy for me to lose the spot that I'm working in. Yeah, I think Facebook's probably going to be the easiest to run and the most easy to manage from my end. There's not a great deal of free time in the day as it is, and anything that takes me away from printmaking too much becomes a slight issue. But hopefully we'll get this block finished tonight. I might just go until I've got it finished, so we can pull the first impression on the stream. That'd be pretty cool. So, question: who in the chat currently is making their own prints? I know a few of you are. I know George is, and a couple others. But who's actually pursuing printmaking in some form or another on their own? And if so, are you doing lino or reduction wood block? Are you working in traditional sort of format as I am, or are you working in more contemporary styles? Are you working on reproductions, or is it all original work? Oh, nice. What are you working on, Ben? Oh, I see. Yeah, I've seen some of your prints, George. It's great work. I'd love it if we could have a real variety of work, because it's not just Japanese woodblock. That is an interesting medium. There's a lot to be learned from lino cutting techniques, and especially things like reduction. It's fascinating. There's a guy, I think he's in New York, Cam Bailey, works in reduction woodblock, and his prints are fantastic. I think I'll zoom out a little bit while I'm doing this. I'm just gonna cut back along some of these lines, and I don't want my hand to obscure the view too much. Also, you can hopefully see if I scale right back, you can see the way that I change angle. So I'm just making some very simple clearing cuts at the moment. But it's true though, George. Any that you can never say that any work anyone does is bad. I feel like it's a huge detriment. Any artistic work is great, and especially learning something such as printmaking. There's so many variables, even with any type of printmaking, and it's so hard to get right and to be really consistent, that I really have a lot of admiration for anyone that makes their own prints, especially people that work on original designs. I wish I could do that. I have nowhere near the artistic ability to be able to do do such a thing. See, this is exactly what I mean, Ben. We're already getting such a great variety of work. It'd be great at some point for us to be able to share these prints with each other and maybe do some form of print exchange or something along those lines. Yeah, I don't think being hard on yourself is necessarily a bad thing. I like to think I hold myself to quite a high standard, and I feel like it acts against complacency in the work that you do, and helps to keep you focused and driven to keep learning. Because ultimately, no one's ever going to stop learning, especially in the arts. There's always a new trick or a new way of working that you don't know about, and by holding yourself to account and I guess you could say being hard on yourself, it sort of keeps you on that path to keep learning and to keep progressing and working on what it is that you enjoy. I don't know if any of you guys have read a book by, I think it's by James Michener, about the FrancisHanga artists in the pre and immediate post-war. So FrancisHanga, for anyone that doesn't know, is creative, means creative prints, and there are a bunch of guys who through one way or another, whether that be through printmaking apprenticeships, some came from Ueno University as watercolour painters or oil painters and stuff, gravitated towards printmaking, but in such a way that it was sort of a rebellious act against ukiyo-e and traditional Japanese printmaking. They disliked or disagreed with the old traditional systems of designer, carver and printer all being separate, and decided to work on prints themselves, carving, publishing and designing, printing, etc., doing the whole process by themselves. And while some of the work is of a high technical standard, a lot of it's not. But the main thing is that they were very creative in their work, and they formed these small groups around their prints, and they held exhibitions of their work as groups, as sort of hanga clubs or hanga groups. And the book itself is called Modern Japanese Prints and Art Reborn, and I loved that book. When I first discovered it, I read it cover to cover, I don't know, 5 times over, and it really inspired me, and it sort of gave me this idea that one day I'd like to form such a club or a group in which we would hold exhibitions and present ourselves as a group of printmakers under the guise of something, some sort of association. And that's sort of a big dream of mine one day, is to sort of not spearhead it and necessarily organise it all myself. And I don't want to be some sort of figurehead. I have no desire for that. But to be part of something like that would be, I feel, really fulfilling. Especially a group of Western artists and Western printmakers that are particularly interested in Japanese artwork and Japanese prints, to sort of show the appreciation that we have, and to show that we can make some pretty cool prints. Yeah, it is. It's quite hard to find. It was written in, I want to say maybe the 60s. It might even be the 50s, George. But I'll see if I can find a link in a few minutes to a page that might sell it a stockist. If not, I'll post it to Patreon and to the Facebook group once I set up. But he was a great patron of the FrancisHanga artists. They were sort of had that Van Gogh curse of they weren't very famous until they were either too old for the money to matter, or until they died. There's a very few people like Kiyoshi Saito, maybe, or Hiratsuka, became quite popular. But other than that, a lot of them never really saw a great deal of success. And this man, James Michener, really helped to patronise a lot of the work that they produced. He helped to organise shows, and he bought hundreds, possibly thousands of their prints. Yeah, and I don't know how much truth there is in this, but I heard somewhere once that the carving knife, the hangito that I'm using now, originally came from the use of is it tanto, the short sword that men used to carry on their waist. And that's where that's supposedly, according to this source I read about somewhere, supposedly that's where that came from. I don't know the validity of that. I can't attest to whether that's true or not, but it's a nice story nonetheless. Yeah, that's it, George, exactly. That's the book itself. Yeah, and he wrote many books. There was a couple that he wrote on sort of the decline of ukiyo-e as well. And I don't know if there's any specific FrancisHanga books, but it's great, that book. It's sort of, each one has a sort of small biography on each. Yeah, I agree with you too. It's a nice story, but it's probably a bit more myth than it is fact. But anyway, yeah, the book, it was sorry, am I cutting? Yeah, okay. it has these great little biographies of each printmaker, and sort of they've got these little illustrations of what each printmaker looked like, and it's a great little book if you can find it. It's a little bit pricey, but in terms of a collection of work and like biographical matter about these printmakers, it's really great. But they would do really sort of quite crazy things, like printing with fish or leaves and stuff like that. And then you had sort of on the other end of it, you had people like Kiyoshi Saito, who became really quite commercially successful and was actually employing professional printers to print his work in the end, because the demand was so great that he couldn't just do it himself. He'd do the that's a good question. So my knife, this is sort of my more of my preference for how I like my knife to be. This is sort of a standard angle that I use. These lines aren't specifically, they're not very fine, so my knife itself isn't too thin on the tip. There are specific angles you will use. If I bring it out a bit and I'll just hold this small stone up here. So when you're sharpening, if I exaggerate a lot, the more pressure you put on this side, the more that you're going to be taking off the tip, and the squarer you'll make it. Generally, a squarer edge is used for long straight lines, and then conversely, the more weight you put on this edge of the blade, the more that you're going to take off there, making a steeper cutting edge to the blade. And sort of the steeper, you don't really need to go crazy steep with it, but if you were doing something very fine like hair or maybe quite tight circles, then you would have a steeper angle to your blade. I have maybe 2 or 3 knives. I'm actually waiting for an order. This is the last one I've got, but I generally have about 2 or 3 knives sharpened at very slightly different angles, because if you're changing the angle of your blade quite often, then you're going to get through that blade a lot quicker. So it's quite good to maybe have at least two knives sharpened, one at a sort of a more general angle such as this, and then one that is maybe a little bit steeper. Because when I'm carving, so these straight lines here, when I'm carving, my knife isn't, how can I illustrate this? So when I'm carving, my blade isn't up on the tip like that. So when you see and I'm carving in here, my blade's quite upright. I'm holding my hand quite, not vertical, but very slightly tilted over. When you're carving a long straight line, you're going to want more of the blade in, so you're going to come on a lower angle, which is fine, because you want more blade in the wood so that there's less chance of you waving and wobbling. So by tipping your hand back like this, you can pull along the line more. That's why you'd see a knife more square on the edge, and in some cases you'll see carver's knives, and they're almost completely square, like a chisel. And that's purely just a line cutting tool. And if you would say cutting like trellis or something like a screen, then obviously you use something like that, because you need more blade in the wood. When you're doing finer work, you want less blade in the wood. But the steeper the angle, the more likely you are to chip the blade and to have breakages and things like that. So that's something to sort of be wary of. If you have any specific concerns about your knife or something, do send me an image on Instagram or something, and I'll see if I can't point you in the right direction. It's slightly hard when I can't see your blade, but this is more of a general purpose, I would say. The angle that might, for my personal taste, I like to have a little bit more blade hanging out. I've got quite chubby fingers, so having more blade out sort of helps me, and I like to rest the ferrule sort of on the back of my thumb. Sorry, not on the back of my thumb, on the back of the ferrule on my fingernail. Whereas some people you'll see they're holding the blade right down here. It doesn't feel very comfortable for me. So it's more a matter of preference and what feels comfortable to you when you're holding it in terms of the blade length. How much you have actually sticking out. The more you have sticking out, the easier it's going to be to maintain a fine edge, because if there's a very short amount of blade coming out from the ferrule, then you're going to wear through quite quick, and you're going to end up with sort of this beveled area here. You're going to end up with sort of a short, fat one that's like quite hard to maintain. So maybe having, I don't know, this is sort of one knuckle's worth on my finger. I'd say that's probably quite general in terms of a length maybe that comes out. I don't know the angle, it's just sort of it's sort of muscle memory at this point to sort of keep it at that sort of angle there. But when my order of blades come, I'll do a section of the stream where I change the angles of them. Do one for very fine carving, hair carving, and one as a more sort of general purpose blade. Because when you get them out the box, they're just sort of sharpened as they are, and they're probably a little bit too fat, so you might want to thin them out on the top side. And you can either do that with if you have a steel, a diamond stone, or you can do it with a very fine what's it called, like a file. You can actually file it down, and then put your edge on it there. But it all sort of depends on the work you're doing. Sometimes if I'm doing something, so if anyone's seen the Darth Vader print, there's one block in the background that's like a platform with a figure stood on, and Jed's original file had it as looking like sort of brush marks, very visible, and I purposely allowed my blade to get a little bit dull, not like blunt, but just to let the blade get a bit dull, so it tears at the wood a little bit more and creates a bit more of a ragged edge. There's certain cases where you would in fact use a slightly dull blade to get a certain effect. And you can do that with a sharp knife, and you can very carefully cut out the brushed hairs and stuff, so it looks like brushwork, or you can sort of make it a bit more ragged and allow because at the printing stage then the water's going to soak up on those ragged edges a bit more and create a sort of slightly blurred effect. Oh, I missed that one there. So now I'm going to do a very small bit of clearing out just on this little section here. I do apologise if it's loud. I'll try and be quick. This little chisel here, this is one of the most important chisels that you really could own. Just a tiny little ice ski chisel. There's so many places on a print where you can just pick a little area out. I really don't own too many chisels. I have sort of a very basic set that I've always had, and that's about it. I have sort of 2 or 3 iSki, 1 clearing, large clearing chisel, that little round U-gouge that I got in a beginner's kit years ago, and a couple of knives. That's about it for all my carving knives. What is this? Maybe 2? Have I got a ruler? Let me check. It is 1. Yeah. Yeah, it is a 1mm. It's probably my favourite chisel. I've sort of thinned it out a little bit as well, turned it into more of a chisel shape, so that I can actually sort of pair off the wood with it. I have that one and this one. They're the 2 main ones that I use for clearing out, and that sort of does it for me. I have a wide one that I like flatten out the large areas where I've hammered away, and my prints are not too large, so I don't really need a great selection of chisels to do the work with. You can also, if you see on Dave's stream, I'm not sure if he's still using it, but he has an iSki that's made out of a sewing needle from a sewing machine, like an industrial sewing needle that he's doctored and turned into a small chisel. And that's really not too hard, so long as it's steel and it's sort of wide enough and strong enough. Because you do, in some places, you do put a fair amount of force, and for such a small piece of metal, you can snap the sort of shaft of the chisel quite easily. So an industrial sewing machine needle's quite perfect for the job. And also a chisel this small sort of tends to ignore the grain direction quite well. So if you don't know, when you're carving, when you're sort of paring out wood, clearing out wood, whether it be for carpentry or whatever, generally you can go across the grain one way and up or down the grain one way. Generally it doesn't work both ways, because the way that the wood grows, it's quite likely that you would tear or encounter areas where you could split the timber, and that's obviously not something that you'd want, especially on a print. You don't want a large area to split out and take one of your nice carved lines out with it. Oh, cool. Sorry if I'm missing things in the chat. Yeah, leatherworker's needle, that would work just as well. Sorry that I'm being rather silent. I just don't want to. I'm focusing, trying not to chip one of these lines. There we go. Let's see what we can't get done for the last few minutes. There's a section in there I've missed. So I can't remember if I mentioned it last time on Wednesday, but this print is going to be one of two. There's going to be two versions of the design. We're going to have a nice daylight version, and there's going to be a sunset version. Jed's been working on the colour scheme for the last couple of days. This print's by Hasui, and we do have colour references to go from. We're just adding a few more blocks. This print was a small postcard type print that was made rather quick, and therefore doesn't have a great deal of blocks to work with. Was maybe only 4 or 5 blocks in total. So we've added a few more. We've got the block count up to 8 or 9 maybe. And there'll be about 12 impressions in total to make the print. It's mostly just adding small gradations here and there in the clouds and the water to give it a little bit more atmosphere. I'm coming up around this corner, when I'm trying to not move the block, so I'll see you can see I've got my finger behind the blade, and I'm pulling whilst keeping the blade steady and stopping it from slipping with this finger. But when I come around the corner, you'll see, I don't know if this is a specific technique, but this is one that I use. I will put my finger on the front side of the blade, and I'll help to sort of push it and guide it round very slow. It's very easy to snap the knife this way, but it's also, I found, quite a good method of working around a corner or a small round without having to turn the block. Obviously it's a bit harder to come around that way. You can't really do it that way. You have to sort of, it's then just a case of wrist flexibility and being very gentle with the knife. But certainly on a left curving, like rounded corner, that might be a technique, I don't know. Being self-taught, you sort of pick up what you think is a new trick, and then you discover, oh, actually that's been done multiple times before, or it's a well-known technique. What time have we got left? So we're coming up on the hour, so I'm not going to get it finished now, but I'll record myself taking the first impression tomorrow and post it to Instagram, I think. So I've still got the calligraphy to do, but there we go. We've made, I think, quite good progress today. Got a large section of that done. Worked through a couple of different techniques. So I'll be live again Wednesday, and by that point I should be on the back end of carving the colour blocks and working up towards test printing. as for showing that, I'm generally I'll be doing that first thing in the morning, UK time, sort of 8 o'clock in the morning UK time. So I don't know how good that would work for anyone, but I do have other carving work to get on with. I have tracing work to get on with. There'll be quite a bit of sizing to get done, so maybe I'll do a sizing stream, and I can sort of show through the process, because I don't quite have the size of workspace or brushes that Dave does, so I've sort of got a bit of a different technique that I've sort of adapted from what Dave showed me as to how I size my paper. So maybe I'll show that. And yeah, so the next stream will be carving colour blocks, and then I'll have to figure it out from then. Yeah, I should really upload them to YouTube. Yeah, I'll do that as well. I'll do both. I'll record a longer version, and I'll couple that in with doing the colour blocks, and I'll turn that into one full video, I think, George. Thanks for that suggestion. And then I'll just upload the initial key block impression to Instagram. But thank you for joining again today, everyone. It's great chatting with you all. I hope you have a excuse me. I hope you have a great weekend. Everyone, stay safe out there. Stay healthy. And I will see you again on Wednesday. I'll be posting the stream schedule to my Instagram on the highlights and on my Instagram profile and to Patreon over the weekend. So you can see each week as to what my schedule is going to be. But thank you again, guys, and everyone. Take care, and I will see you again.